this is the indirect demo. So what we have here is our current configuration. This box here is our main machine. Inside this is nothing special, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and this PCIe expansion cable which is going out to our actual system. If I lead you over to this PCIe expansion system, what we can see is this is the PCIe expansion system. There is nothing special on this board. All there is a couple of slots of PCIe going through to this switch, which is a microsemi switch tech switch, going through back down up to our CPU host. In this system, nothing is being controlled by the CPU. It is all hosted from the GPU. It's doing its checksumming, it's hosting its own I/O. It's basically running its own system. It is in charge of transferring memory to and from the NVMe without ever transferring information back to the CPU. The link between the CPU and this backplane is limited to a PCIe 2 X1 cable, 500 megabit per second, max. So what we'll do is we'll show you this demo of a movie being transferred from the GPU to the NVMe without ever going back to the CPU. Michael?
Yep, so we'll start running the demo now. So the first part of the demo is taking the frames that are stored on the CPU and putting them onto the GPU. So we'll start that now. So we've got a 6 megabyte frame size with a 3 gigabyte buffer on the GPU, with being able to store 512 frames. So that is done now at 379 megabytes per second transfer. And so the next bit is going from the GPU to the NVMe. So it sends the frames to the NVMe, checksums the frames, and sends the checksums to the NVMe also, which is completed now. For the NVMe transfer, we get 4.5 gigabytes per second. Now the next stage is taking it from the NVMe and going back to the GPU. And we'll start that now. And so that's completed with 4.5 gigabytes per second. It's checksummed them again and got 100% checksums parts. Now it returns back to the CPU so we can display the frames. So we'll start displaying on this screen.
So currently all of the frames are loaded up onto the GPU. The CPU's launched OpenGL calls to get those frames and display them directly to the screen via the GPU output. The most important thing to note is that you can see that we've got 4.5 gigasecond both read and write between the NVMe and the GPU. We're with only 380 megabytes per second loading the frames up to the GPU. We can clearly tell that via this PCIe X1 cable there's no way that we could get 4.5 gigabytes per second from the GPU to the NVMe.